in our series based on the mother's works compiled in The Great Adventure. Today we shall take up the passage dealing with sincerity, rather two passages on pages 62 and 63. Last month also we did two passages on sincerity, and this just underscores the great importance that the mother has attached to sincerity that we have in this collection. Such a large number of passages on sincerity itself, and then so many more in which the same subject will keep coming up in different ways, in different contexts. And as we discussed last time, sincerity essentially means trying to be not different from what we really are, or rather not trying to appear different from what we really are. Not only that, if we aspire to be something, then sincerely try to move in that direction without one part of us aspiring and another not, and ourselves not being able to resolve that conflict. Now this, last time the focus was on not trying to appear different from what we really are, which sometimes seems as if we don't have to be hypocritical, we don't have to appear to the outside world different from what we really are. But today the focus will be on not trying to be, trying to feel that we are different from what we should be to ourselves, which means that being sincere to ourselves. Because cheating ourselves can also be very easy. We can convince ourselves that we truly want something, we truly are something, and yet be in love with something that we don't profess to love. So we can have that conflict, because we have within us both these elements, the divine and its imperfect manifestation. The imperfect manifestation is something that we in fact identify ourselves more with. The surface, mind, our feelings and thoughts, we identify ourselves more with that than with our true essence, the divine essence, the soul, of which the part that participates in our day-to-day life is the psychic being. Now, it's not with the soul and the psychic being that we normally identify ourselves, because we are so constituted that that remains an area of ignorance. That is the ignorance with which we are born. That is the ignorance that we seek to remove in the process of sadhana. But then the surface with which we normally identify ourselves is something that not only we consider to be very real, but we are also in love with many of its imperfections. That is what creates the difficulty. Because on one hand, we know that it is not the best part of us. It is not truly us, at least we understand at a theoretical level, that is not truly us. The truly us is our divine essence, and that is the one which we should approach, that is the one which should manifest in our surface instruments also. But then at the same time, our surface instruments have a great attraction for us. We love them. And sometimes we also place a greater reliance on them. In that novel by Chetan Bhagat, A Night at the Call Center, has any of you read that? A few of you have. There is a scene in which there are 5 or 6 young people who are returning late at night from somewhere, and then they get caught in an area where there's some construction work going on, and the vehicle sinks, and they are at the edge of a cliff or something, and it's a very dangerous situation. Just one step more and they could be all dead. If the car moves one step further or something caves in, they will be all dead. So they are all very worried, and they start praying and thinking about what to do, and then the phone rings. Their cell phone rings, and when they answer the phone, they're surprised to hear that the call is from God. It says, "I'm God speaking." Now this is something that we are not accustomed to, and So they don't believe it. So God says, well, if you don't believe me, it's up to you, then you can save yourself. You can do what you like to save yourself. But then, they want to believe and yet they can't believe because they place greater reliance on the mind, on what we are more accustomed to as real. So then anyway, then God throws, an offer. He says that, well, if I show you a miracle, will you believe in me? He said, yes, then we would. So they feel that's not nice compromise, so we are getting some evidence, the type of evidence the human mind wants. But then God comes up with an answer which is truly amazing. And God says, if I have to show you a miracle, I will have to break the very laws that I have made. Now, which means that the universe has certain laws, it follows certain norms, and I am the one who has created those, and what you consider a miracle is something that is that does not obey those laws, so I'll have to break the very laws that I have made. Now, this is something which they find a truly penetrating and incisive answer, so they agree to believe, and then they are saved. So the point that I was trying to make was that we are in love with our own imperfections for various reasons. We place greater reliance on our intellect, on what appears more real to our senses. We have a great attachment to our possessions. We have a great attachment to our relationships. We have a great attachment to worldly pleasures. And while on one hand we feel that they can be obstructions on the path of our further progress, we remain divided. One part of us is willing to give them up, one part of us is not. And then we somehow keep hoping and praying that somehow we'll be an exception, we'll escape. And as Sri Aurobindo says very beautifully in Savitri, that we start pleading for heavenly leniency, just for us, as if we can somehow be special and be exempted and allowed what again Sri Aurobindo calls the sweet weaknesses of the mortal state. These weaknesses of the mortal state have a certain sweetness about them, and we start pleading for heavenly leniency, just allows that little bit. And that is how we end up cheating ourselves. Let's go to the passages that we are doing today. The mother says, if you are not absolutely sincere, not only with others but also with yourself, if at any time you try to cover up your imperfections and failings, you will never make any progress. You will always remain what you are throughout all your life without ever making any progress. So, even if you only want to grow out of this primitive unconscious state into a progressive consciousness, the most important thing, the one absolutely important thing, is sincerity. If you have done something which you ought not to have done, you must admit it to yourself. If a less than admirable movement has occurred in yourself, you must look it in the face and tell it was not good, or it was disgusting, or even that it was wicked. So the mother has emphasized in this passage the need for this absolute sincerity with ourselves, not cheating ourselves, being absolutely sincere about any negative movement that takes place in us, and admitting to ourselves that yes, it was wrong, it was bad, and I don't want it. So the only way to grow out of our present state is to be totally sincere, to be able to identify what we do not want, and then try to root it out. And this is necessary not only for getting to that peak, that peak realization, but even if you only want to grow out of this primitive unconscious state into a progressive consciousness, just for moving step by step towards the goal, towards that realization, just for making that progress, for our consciousness rising bit by bit in small steps, even for that, this absolute sincerity is important. Because unless we become frank and sincere enough to identify our own weaknesses, instead of trying to cover them up, we will not be able to make any progress. Covering up is something which we are doing even at our homes, we all have a storeroom. And whatever we feel is junk, not wanted, but at the same time we are attached to it, we don't want to throw it. Where do we put it? We put it in the store. Now, the store does have a purpose, but at the same time, it gets misused. We keep putting a lot of junk, which really we do not need. And so long as the living room, the drawing room looks clean and neat, we are happy. The others will not know, but then that is hiding somewhere. Now, that same thing is happening within us. We have that storeroom within us. We push that unwanted thing into a corner. It keeps lying there in dark. We ourselves refuse to see it. And at the same time, that keeps coming up again and again from that darkness somewhere and comes in way of our further progress. So what we have to do is, instead of throwing it in that darkness, to see it against the light of the divine that is within us. We throw that light on it so that instead of remaining obscure, it becomes visible, and then we can deal with it, confront it, and pull it out. It is only when you look yourself in the face, in the light of your highest consciousness, that whatever you want to eliminate from your nature will disappear. Without this striving for the defect, the little shadow will stay in a corner, biding its time to come out. And the mother has compared here these negative movements, these undesirable thoughts and feelings, undesirable habits, with a shadow. In a state of ignorance, the shadow can appear to us like ourselves. The shadow resembles us. But then at the same time, true knowledge means that we know that the shadow is not me. The shadow looks like me, but the shadow is not me. In the same way, what I think I am, actually that is not what I am. I identify myself with my body and mind, but that is not what I am. I am truly the divine essence. That is my most fundamental reality. So when I am able to see those negativities as not me, see them as a shadow, only then I'll be able to root them out. Yesterday, Tara Didi was reading during the meditation a dialogue a question-answer session between the children in Pondicherry and the mother, and a child asked the question, "Mother, if there is something which undesirable I feel like doing, and I use my willpower to not do it, does that mean that I have been able to root out my weakness for what I wanted to do?" The mother said, "No, that is not rooting out. That would just mean that you are sitting on the weakness." See, the difference between rooting it out and sitting on it. Sitting on it means, like a suppression, somehow making it stay in the background for some time. That is like sitting on it. That is not rooting it out. And then she went on to say that rooting it out would mean that you confront it. You throw light on it, and that's the inner light. You see it in that inner light and tell it resolutely, "You are not me. This weakness is not me. This is not my true self." Tell that weakness, "You are not me. I don't want you." So that is rooting it out, not just using your willpower for that moment, not doing what you felt like doing. Sitting on it, it will come up again. So that is not rooting it out. So that is the difference. So we recognize it as something which is not me, take it as a shadow which looks like me but is not really me, and that is how we will be able to root it out. Otherwise, it will be just biding its time and will keep coming up again and again. Then further, the mother says in the next passage, "Things are not beautiful, the world is nasty, people are not pleasant, it goes sometimes to this length, the food is not good, yesterday it was excellent, it is the same, but today it is not good, this is the barometer." You may immediately tell yourself that an insincerity has crept in somewhere. Initially, it looks a little difficult to understand why this type of complaints that the world is not good, the people around me are not good, the food is not good, what these complaints have got to do with sincerity. But then, on reflection, you find that yes, there is a relationship, there is a link. The reason why we make all these complaints is because we have that division within us. We are divided. One part of us wants one thing, another wants something else. One part of us wants to seek the divine, another part of us is in love with our everyday life, with our everyday comforts, with the usual so-called normal, ordinary life. And whenever there's a conflict, there's a discrepancy, there's an uneasiness. And when there is an uneasiness, we feel uncomfortable about it, and somehow we want to avoid that uneasiness. And then what do? We start seeking some sort of relief in distractions. We start talking about things which may not be very relevant to the type of conflict we have. This happens in everyday life, also. Sometimes a person has one type of problem, but because he doesn't want to face that problem, he starts talking about other things. Say there is a disharmony within the family, but people feel that somehow talking about it will lead to a flare-up. They don't want to talk about it. They continue talking about all the other useless things which have nothing to do with the no importance, but then it's just being used as a cover-up. So this type of complaints can be sorts of cover-ups for that basic uneasiness which we have because of being divided within ourselves. And so they serve as distractions, but the basic problem really remains, that uneasiness remains, and therefore the person becomes unhappy. And that is what the mother goes on to say further. She says, it is very easy to know. You do not need to be very learned. For as Sri Aurobindo has said in the Elements of Yoga, one knows whether one is happy or unhappy. One knows whether one is content or discontented. One does not need to ask oneself, put complicated questions for this. One knows it. Well, it is very simple. One always knows whether one is happy or unhappy. One is unhappy because of this division within, and then one tries to cover it up by other complaints, as if the uneasiness or that unhappiness is because of the world being bad, the world being nasty, people around being not good, or even that the food today is not good. The moment you feel unhappy, you may write beneath it, I am not sincere. The two sentences go together. I feel unhappy, I am not sincere. Now, what is it that is wrong? Then one begins to take a look. It is easy to find out. So, if one can see that the root of unhappiness lies in this lack of sincerity, then one would start looking at what is wrong, where is that insincerity, where is it that my professed aspiration does not match the negativities, the undesirable things, which also I am in love with. It's this conflict that I am unable to resolve, and that is what is making me unhappy. And that is where lack of sincerity comes in. However, this conflict will be seen only if at least there is some urge for sincerity, there is some aspiration. So that is one consolation, and the mother has said that also elsewhere, that the consciousness of being insincere is the first step towards sincerity. So the fact that a person is able to see this lack of total sincerity is itself a step towards sincerity, and then one knows that I am unhappy, I am uneasy, I am complaining about all sorts of irrelevant things because I am not able to resolve this conflict. Whole of me, all of me does not want the same thing. There is a division. I am in love with some of my weaknesses, some of my ignorance, some of the things which I need to reject, but I am unable to reject. Rejection is part of our sadhana: aspiration, rejection, and surrender. These are the three basic pillars of sadhana in integral yoga. There should be an aspiration that is intense, vigilant, perseverant, but not impatient, and of course, totally sincere. So that is the type of aspiration we should have. And then rejection of everything that comes in way of this aspiration, and then the surrender. That is, knowing that we cannot do it all by ourselves, surrender to the divine. So these are the three basic elements in the sadhana. And since we have a large number of new persons today, let me once again repeat that analogy that I gave a few weeks back, and that was that it is something like plastic surgery. When a woman wants a makeover, wants to look much prettier than she is, and she thinks a plastic surgeon can do it, then what is the type of processes she goes through? She first starts developing more and more of an intense desire to look better, which means that is the aspiration. And the aspiration that we have to manifest the divinity is no less of a makeover. It's a sea change. It's a remarkable change compared to the type of life which we are normally accustomed to. Compared to that, what we aspire for is an immense change, is a remarkable change. So it's no less than a makeover. It's an extremely profound makeover. And therefore, the same type of aspiration is required as this woman who wants to look better. But then once she develops this aspiration, she puts in a call to the doctor. The same we send the call to the divine. The divine responds like the doctor responds, yes, I am ready to do the surgery. But then the woman starts developing cold feet. Why? Because it will cost so much. There might be an infection after the surgery. There might be complications. I might end up even uglier than I look now. People around her also start discouraging her. You are quite good as you are. Outer beauty is not so important. Inner beauty is more important. So, she develops, she faces resistance from within and resistance from outside. The same happens in this also. The person puts in that call, aspires, puts in that call. There is resistance from within because we are in love with so many of our weaknesses, and there is resistance from outside. Our friends and relatives, they all start feeling, isko kya ho gaya hai? This person has gone mad. He doesn't behave the way he used to. There's something wrong with this person. So there's a resistance from outside, the resistance from within, and therefore the person starts developing cold feet. Now what we need to do is to reject all these obstacles. So this woman also finally rejects all these obstacles and somehow decides that no, I must undergo this surgery. Then what does she do? She knows I can't do it all by myself. So she once again tells the doctor, okay, you do it, I am in your hands. And the doctor tells her, okay, if you are ready for it, then here is the informed consent form. Sign this form that I agree to undergo the surgery at my own risk. So surrender is like signing that consent form. That is the surrender. So we surrender. Okay, I'm in your hands, I can't do it all by myself. I sign this consent form, take care of me. So that is surrender. So the same thing goes for this makeover, which we call yoga. Again, we need these three steps. The aspiration, put in the call, the divine response. Then we develop all these resistances from outside and within, reject all those, and then finally give your consent and surrender. So that is what yoga is about. So next time we end a letter with these words, yours sincerely. We have to think twice what we really mean and what this sincerity is. It's not as simple as it looks. We do it so casually. When I was in school, the standard teaching was when you are writing an official letter, I say yours faithfully. When you are writing to a friend, you write yours sincerely. These days, we try to appear more friendly. So even official letters end with yours sincerely, and more personal letters end with yours with love, yours with warm regards, and with warm personal regards, and with a lot of love, and so on and so forth. So the things have changed, and faithfully has more or less disappeared. I hope faith has not disappeared, but yours faithfully hardly anybody writes. Even in official letters, we write yours sincerely. So yours sincerely has become one of the most common ways in which we end our letters these days, but then it's not as simple as it looks. Now, I think the best I can do is to close with a passage from Savitri, which is very closely related to what we have been talking about today. This is on page 318, book 3, canto 3. It's a part of Ashupati's yoga. Now Ashupati has reached a very high level of consciousness in his sadhana, but in his finding that still there are some elements within which resist this change, and he's trying to deal with them. That's what it is about. All nature's recondite spaces were stripped bare. All her dim crypts and corners searched with fire, where refugee instincts and unshaped revolts could shelter find in darkness's sanctuary against the white purity of heaven's cleansing flame. So he's talking about laying bare all those recondite spaces, that obscure spaces which had all these negativities still hidden somewhere, like the storeroom of the mind. All her dim crypts and corners searched with fire. As with a searchlight, we can use some fire, the fire within, the fire of the divine within, to search those corners. And what is hiding there in those corners? Where refugee instincts and unshaped revolts could shelter find in darkness's sanctuary. So there is a darkness within where refugee instincts, that is instincts, which have come from our past, from somewhere outside, from the universal nature and so on, and unshaped revolts, that is something within which is revolting, but has not been able to give itself a proper shape, could shelter find, it means could find shelter in darkness's sanctuary. So they are finding their shelter there, and we can search them with that fire against the white purity of heaven's cleansing flame. So there is that resistance. They refuse to be searched in that fashion. All seemed to have perished that was undivine, yet some minutest dissident might escape, and still a center lurk of the blind force. So even when it seems that everything undivine has disappeared, there is some minute dissident, that is, that which does not agree with that change, that makeover which has taken place, might be lurking somewhere. For the inconscient too is infinite. The more its abysses we insist to sound, the more it stretches endlessly. And why does that happen? Because the inconscient, that is the manifestation that lacks consciousness, that's the higher consciousness, in which the consciousness is completely hidden, completely dormant. That inconscient too is infinite. It is also a manifestation of the same infinite. And therefore, it also has that character of persisting, because what is infinite tends to persist, tends to recur. It can be infinite in its recurrence, if not infinite in its persistence. So it has a certain amount of infinite recurrence, because the inconscient is also infinite. For the inconscient too is infinite. The more its abysses we insist to sound, the more it stretches endlessly. The more we try to deal with it, the more it seems to go on stretching. Then, lest a human cry should spoil the truth, he tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant space. So this is how Ashupati dealt with those remaining weaknesses. Then, lest a human cry should spoil the truth, that human cry, oh, I'm so much in love with these weaknesses, that cry. Before that cry should spoil the truth, in order to prevent that cry, that human cry, that I'm in love with so many things, how can I give them all up? Can I somehow keep them still? Before that cry comes, he tore desire up from its bleeding roots. He tore it from its very roots, as the mother was saying, that tearing it from the roots means show it that light, that flare, like sometimes in darkness, we use those flares for searching things. So that use the soul, the psychic being, as a flare, and when you find that, yes, this is the shadow and this is not truly me, tell it right in the face, confront it, I don't want you. So that's what Sri Aurobindo was saying here. He tore desire up from its bleeding roots. Because desire is what essentially sums up all these negativities. In one word, if we have to put all the types of negativities that we want to root out, they can be summed up as desires. So he tore desire up from its bleeding roots. When you tear it, because we are so attached to it, it's as if the place where you tear it, that starts bleeding. But then he tore it up, and then once you tear out something, there's a vacant space left. Now nature abhors a vacuum. So if we leave it vacant, again some other negativity might come in. So that's why he says, he tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant space. So to immediately fill it up with something positive. Root out a negativity and don't leave it vacant, fill it up with something positive. That is equally important. Fill it up with its very opposite. So this is the process of rejection. Then lest a human cry should spoil the truth, he tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant place. Thus could he bear the touch immaculate. So it's only when he did this, he could bear that immaculate touch of the divine. Because the touch of the divine itself can be such a strong, electrifying touch that it needs a preparation to bear it. No. It's easy to look at the ordinary room light. But if we have to look at the sun, it becomes very dazzling. It's dazzling. We can't look at it. So in the same way, the immaculate touch of the divine is electrifying and needs a preparation. And the final part of that preparation was rooting out that desire and filling up that vacant space with God. Now the preparation was complete, and therefore now he could bear the touch immaculate. A last and mightiest transformation came. So as a result of this, now the transformation was complete. This was the last bit of the transformation that was needed. His soul was all in front like a great sea, flooding the mind and body with its waves. His being spread to embrace the universe, united the within and the without, to make of life a cosmic harmony, an empire of the immanent divine. So this is what happened as a result, that his soul came forwards, it came to the very front and prevailed. It could now prevail. He could organize his life around it, flooding the mind and the body with its waves. The mind and the body, all these surface instruments, were flooded with that one light, the light of the divine. His being spread to embrace the universe, united the within with the without. There was no difference between his within and his without. The divinity within was also manifest without. Not only without on his surface, but without means everywhere outside, as we see it. An empire of the immanent divine. So he became truly an empire of the immanent divine. Immanent divine, all-pervasive divine, the one that exists within and operates from within. That is the immanent. In this tremendous universality, not only his soul nature and mind sense included every soul and mind in his, but even the life of flesh and nerve was changed, and grew one flesh and nerve with all that lives. Now, as a result of this transformation, what happened was that not only his mind was changed, but even the life of the flesh and nerve was changed, which means even at the level of the physical there was a transformation. And he felt that his flesh and blood, his flesh and nerve, were one with all that lives. He could see a continuity of consciousness between even his body and the rest of the creation. He could feel that not only at the level of the mind, but even at the level of the body. And then, comes the last bit, which is very important in integral yoga, because in integral yoga we don't stop at salvation of the individual. The individual has realized it, yes, but then it should reflect, this inner change should reflect in outer life. And this is how it gets reflected in outer life, in Ashwapati's outer life. He felt the joy of others as his joy. One can see that deeper oneness, the oneness at the deepest level, the oneness with the rest of the creation, the practical implication is that he felt the joy of others as his joy, he bore the grief of others as his grief. The joys and sorrows of others become our joys and sorrows. Means there's no difference. That's how that oneness reflects. He felt the joy of others as his joy, he bore the grief of others as his grief. His universal sympathy upbore, immense like ocean, the creation's load, as earth upbears all beings' sacrifice, thrilled with the hidden transcendence, joy and peace. So he felt everybody's joy as his joy, everybody else's grief as his grief, and this was a sort of a universal sympathy which could upbear or support the entire creation's load. And for that, two similes have been given, the ocean and the earth. Like the ocean can accept the water from all the rivers that come, and the earth bears the entire load, the entire load of the beings that it supports. So in the same way, he could also upbear, and his universal sympathy could upbear the joys and sorrows of the entire creation. But in spite of bearing all this, the creation's load, there was no sense of tiredness or exhaustion. What was the feeling? The feeling was thrilled with hidden transcendence, joy and peace. So there was a thrill, there was a joy, and there was peace. So it is not the type of, it's not that this feeling of oneness, sharing, or feeling the joys and sorrows of the rest of the creation as his own. It did not make him feel as if there's a great burden that he's carrying. The ocean does not seem to feel that burden. The earth does not seem to feel that burden. In the same way, he also did not feel the burden. Instead, what he felt was a thrill, thrilled with the hidden transcendence, joy and peace.